Welcome back to our reading of The Life of Pi. In this video, we're covering Chapter 77 and Chapter 78. The Life of Pi by Jan Martel, Chapter 77. As the cartons of survival rations diminished, I reduced my intake till I was following instructions exactly, holding myself to only 2 biscuits every 8 hours. I was continuously hungry. I thought about food obsessively. The less I had to eat, the larger became the portion that I dreamed of. My fantasy meals grew to the size of India, a Ganges of dal soup, hot chapatis the size of Rajasthan, bowls of rice as big as Uttar Pradesh, summers to flood all of Tamil Nadu, ice cream heaped as high as the Himalayas. My dreaming became quite expert. All ingredients for my dishes were always in fresh and plentiful supply. The oven or the frying pan was always at just the right temperature. The proportion of things was always bang on. Nothing was ever burned or undercooked, nothing too hot or too cold. Every meal was simply perfect, only just beyond the reach of my hands. By degrees, the range of my appetite increased. Whereas at first I gutted fish and peeled their skin fastidiously, soon I no more than rinsed off their slimy slipperiness before biting into them, delighted to have such a treat between my teeth. I recall flying fish as being quite tasty, their flesh rosy, white, and tender. Dorado had a firmer texture and a stronger taste. I began to pick at fish heads rather than toss them to Richard Parker or use them as bait. It was a great discovery when I found that a fresh-tasting fluid could be sucked out not only from the eyes of larger fish but also from their vertebrae. Turtles, which previously had been roughly opened with a knife and tossed into the floor of the boat for Richard Parker, like a bowl of hot soup, became my favorite dish. It seems impossible to imagine that there was a time when I looked upon a live sea turtle as a 10-course meal of great delicacy, a blessed respite from fish. Yet so it was. In the veins of turtles coursed a sweet lassi that had to be drunk as soon as it splurted from their necks because it coagulated in less than a minute. The best boreals and kutus in the land could not rival turtle flesh, either cured brown or fresh deep red. No cardamom payasam I ever tasted was as sweet or as rich as creamy turtle eggs or cured turtle fat. A chopped up mixture of heart, lungs, liver, flesh, and cleaned out intestines sprinkled with fish parts, the whole soaked with a yolk and serum gravy, made an unsurpassable finger-licking thali. By the end of my journey, I was eating everything a turtle had to offer. In the algae that covered the shells of some hawksbills, I sometimes found small crabs and barnacles. Whatever I found in a turtle's stomach became my turn to eat. I whiled away many a pleasant hour gnawing at a flipper joint or splitting open bones and licking out their marrow, and my fingers were forever picking away at bits of dry fat and dry flesh that clung to the inner sides of the shells, rummaging for food in the automatic way of monkeys. Turtle shells were very handy. I couldn't have done without them. They served not only as shields, but as cutting boards for fish and as bowls for mixing food. And when the elements had destroyed the blankets beyond repair, I used the shells to protect myself from the sun by propping them against each other and lying beneath them. It was frightening, the extent to which a full belly made for a good mood. The one would follow the other, measure for measure, so much food and water, so much good mood. It was such a terribly fickle existence. I was at the mercy of turtle meat for smiles. By the time the last of the biscuits had disappeared, anything was good to eat, no matter the taste. I could put anything in my mouth, chew it and swallow it, delicious, foul, or plain, so long as it wasn't salty. My body developed a revulsion for salt that I still experience to this day. I tried once to eat Richard Parker's feces. It happened early on, when my system hadn't learned yet to live with hunger and my imagination was still wildly searching for solutions. I had delivered fresh soda-still water to his bucket not long before. After draining it in one go, he had disappeared below the tub, and I had returned to attending to some small matter in the locker. As I always did in those early days, I glanced below the tub every so often to make sure he wasn't up to something. Well, this one time, lo, he was. He was crouched, his back was rounded, and his rear legs were spread. His tail was raised, pushing up against the tub. The position was telltale. Right away, I had food in my mind, not animal hygiene. I decided there was little danger. He was turned the other way, and his head was out of sight. If I respected his peace and quiet, he might not even notice me. I grabbed a bailing cup and stretched my arm forward. My cup arrived in the nick of time. At the second it was in position at the base of his tail, Richard Parker's anus distended, and out of it, like a bubblegum balloon, came a black sphere of excrement. It fell into my cup with a clink, and no doubt I will be considered to have abandoned the last vestiges of humanness by those who do not understand the degree of my suffering when I say that it sounded to my ears like the music of a 5-rupee coin dropped into a beggar's cup. A smile cracked my lips and made them bleed. I felt deep gratitude toward Richard Parker. I pulled back the cup. I took the turd in my fingers. It was very warm, but the smell was not strong. In size, it was like a big ball of gulab jamun, but with none of the softness. In fact, it was as hard as a rock. Load a musket with it, and you could have shot a rhino. I returned the ball into the cup and added a little water. I covered it and set it aside. My mouth watered as I waited. When I couldn't stand the wait any longer, I popped the ball into my mouth. I couldn't eat it. The taste was acrid. But it wasn't that. It was rather my mouth's conclusion, immediate and obvious. There's nothing to be had here. It was truly waste matter, with no nutrients at all. I spat it out and was bitter at the loss of precious water. I took the gaff and went about collecting the rest of Richard Parker's feces. They went straight to the fish. After just a few weeks, my body began to deteriorate. My feet and ankles started to swell, and I was finding it very tiring to stand. Chapter 78. There were many skies. The sky was invaded by great white clouds, flat on the bottom but round and billowy on top. The sky was completely cloudless, of a blue quite shattering to the senses. The sky was a heavy, suffocating blanket of grey cloud, but without promise of rain. The sky was thinly overcast. The sky was dappled with small, white, fleecy clouds. The sky was streaked with high, thin clouds that looked like a cotton ball stretched apart. The sky was a featureless, milky haze. The sky was a density of dark and blustery rain clouds that passed by without delivering rain. The sky was painted with a small number of flat clouds that looked like sandbars. The sky was a mere block to allow a visual effect on the horizon, sunlight flooding the ocean, the vertical edges between light and shadow perfectly distinct. The sky was a distant black curtain of falling rain. The sky was many clouds at many levels, some thick and opaque, others looking like smoke. The sky was black and spitting rain on my face, smiling face. The sky was nothing but falling water, a ceaseless deluge that wrinkled and bloated my skin and froze me stiff. There were many seas. The sea roared like a tiger. The sea whispered in your ear like a friend telling you secrets. The sea clinked like small change in a pocket. The sea thundered like avalanches. The sea hissed like sandpaper working on wood. The sea sounded like someone vomiting. The sea was dead silent. And in between the two, in between the sky and the sea, were all the winds. And there were all the nights and all the moons. To be a castaway is to be a point perpetually at the center of a circle. However much things may appear to change, the sea may shift from whisper to rage, the sky might go from fresh blue to blinding white to darkest black, the geometry never changes. Your gaze is always a radius, the circumference is ever great. In fact, the circles multiply. To be a castaway is to be caught in a harrowing ballet of circles. You are at the center of one circle, while above you two opposing circles spin about. The sun distresses you like a crowd, a noisy, invasive crowd that makes you cup your ears, that makes you close your eyes, that makes you want to hide. The moon distresses you by silently reminding you of your solitude. You open your eyes wide to escape your loneliness. When you look up, you sometimes wonder if at the center of the solar system, if in the middle of the sea of tranquility, there isn't another one like you, also looking up, also trapped by geometry, also struggling with fear, rage, madness, hopelessness, and apathy. Otherwise, to be a castaway is to be caught up in grim and exhausting opposites. When it is light, the openness of the sea is blinding and frightening. When it is dark, the darkness is claustrophobic. When it is day, you are hot and wish to be cool and dream of ice cream and pour seawater on yourself. When it is night, you are cold and wish to be warm and dream of hot curries and wrap yourself in blankets. When it is hot, you are parched and wish to be wet. When it rains, you are nearly drowned and wish to be dry. When there is food, there is too much of it and you must feast. When there is none, there is truly none, and you starve. When the sea is flat and motionless, you wish it would stir. When it rises up and that circle becomes that imprisons you is broken by hills of water, you suffer that peculiarity of the high seas, suffocation in open spaces, and you wish the sea would be flat again. The opposites often take place at the same moment, so that when the sun is scorching till you are stricken down, You are always aware that it is drying the strips of fresh flesh and meat that are hanging from your lines, and that it is a blessing for your solar stills. Conversely, when the rain squall is replenishing your freshwater supplies, you also know that the humidity will affect your cured provisions and that some will probably go bad, turning pasty and green. When rough water abates, it becomes clear that you have survived the sky's attack and the sea's treachery. Your jubilation is tempered by the rage that so much fresh water should fall directly into the sea, and by the worry that it is the last rain you will ever see, that you will die of thirst before the next drops fall. The worst pair of opposites is boredom and terror. Sometimes your life is a pendulum swinging from one to the other. The sea is without a wrinkle. There is not a whisper of wind. The hours last forever. You are so bored you sink into a state of apathy, close to a coma. Then the sea becomes rough and your emotions are whipped into a frenzy. Yet even these two opposites do not remain distinct. In your boredom there are elements of terror. You break down into tears. You are filled with dread. You scream. You deliberately hurt yourself. And in the grip of terror, the worst storm, you yet feel boredom, a deep weariness with it all. Only death consistently excites your emotions, whether contemplating it when life is safe and stale, or fleeing it when life is threatened and precious. Life on a lifeboat isn't much of a life. It is like an end game in chess, a game with a few pieces. The elements couldn't be more simple, nor the stakes higher. Physically, it is extraordinarily arduous, and morally, it is killing. You must make adjustments if you want to survive. Much becomes expendable. You get your happiness where you can. You reach a point when you're at the bottom of hell, yet you have your arms crossed and a smile on your face, and you feel you're the luckiest person on earth. Why? Because at your feet, you have tiny dead fish. That's chapter 38. Stay tuned for chapter 78. Stay tuned for chapter 79.